Week 13 college football and chaos has ensued. And the SEC people, y'all better be real humble and getting them comments per the usual. And of course, we got to talk which teams are going to make the college football playoff top 12 and all of the stories because there was an utter collapse by Colorado and a whole bunch of other teams that we have to talk about. And you guys know this is the Unafraid Show. Make sure that you like, subscribe, get notifications, and tell a friend. Let's get to the show. So, week 13, the chaos is here. Make sure that you guys like, subscribe, get notifications, and tell a friend. And most importantly, hop in them comments, leave something in the chat, especially if you got something good to say. But first of all, I want to make sure that everybody's coming in here with the proper level of humility and honesty that it takes to talk about college football. Because the media, the mainstream media, they told us that the college football playoff, the expansion, it was going to minimize the importance of the regular season. In fact, more games are important. And college football is now better off. If we're being honest, college football is way better off with the 12-team playoff than without the 12-team playoff. And just think about it is the next to last week of the regular season, which was week 13. And who would have thought before the season even started that Arizona State versus BYU or a two-loss Alabama team that was playing against a below 500 Oklahoma team would even matter? Or even SMU versus Virginia for that matter, or Indiana versus Ohio State. All of these games have so much importance. And I tried to tell people this when the college football playoff expansion was getting ready to happen, and so many people acted so scared. Oh, it's fine at 4. It's going to minimize the regular season. No, it actually expands the offerings of how many games actually matter. Now, it does put less emphasis on a win or a loss because you can survive a loss, particularly depending on what conference that you are in or what your name brand is. Think about the Colorado versus Kansas upset. It literally carried the same impact on the college football playoff as Ole Miss getting beat by Florida. Because Ole Miss is now out of the SEC championship running. Colorado is basically out of the Big 12 running, and neither one of them is going to make the college football playoff unless just an enormous set of things happens weird over the next over the next week and then the championship week after that. Now, college football is not broken. And are there things that need to be fixed with NIL, the transfer portal, and conference realignment? Yes, absolutely. But the sport is even greater than it was. Look at this weekend and the games that we have to cover. I mean, good God, there is no shortage of narratives. There's no shortage of timelines. There's no shortage of relevant things to talk about. And this is the thing that I love about it. And I want to know how you guys feel about it. You guys can leave it in the comments here on the Unafraid Show. Is I love the fact that nobody is safe in a week in and week out basis in college football. Nobody is safe. There is no single solitary team besides Oregon and Ohio State probably that is completely safe in 2024 in terms of pretty much whoever else you put out there on the field. If you put them out there versus quote unquote inferior competition, those two teams are the only two teams that feel safe that will guaranteed take care of business and come out of there with a win. And for the last 2 weeks, we have heard hypocritical SEC tears. Oh, they have flowed about strength of schedule. They don't want to talk about strength of record, only strength of schedule. And why isn't Alabama ranked higher? But or Ole Miss or Georgia, but you can't complain now, except Georgia because they didn't. But you cannot complain when you are losing to 500 teams or below. Playoff teams are supposed to beat those teams. And people, oh well, look at the Big Ten. They're so top heavy. Yes, this is the way the SEC has been because the Big Ten's top teams don't lose to the Minnesotas, the Iowas, the Michigan States, and the Rutgers this year. It just hasn't happened. And this is what I want you guys to pay attention to over the next week, two plus in the world of college football. And that is the sketchy folks, the sketchy media that will try to paint narratives just like this. Think about last year. You had Florida State not in the playoff. Oh, they stink without Jordan Travis. Now, what happens if Quinn Ewers and that ankle are actually injured? Is anybody then going to be talking about, oh, well, I don't know if Texas should be in the college football playoff if they lose to Texas A&M. I don't know about that. Really? Really? Okay, see, exactly. This is where the brand bias, and you have to follow the money. This is what I consistently say. Follow the money because the big brands that they have typically generated the ratings in college football because they have huge fan bases. And that's why when the big brands get upset, those games do crazy ratings as well. And the networks love it. And they kind of hate it too because they don't want the big brands losing. But now in the world of college football, we are expanding into a era of parity, which the NFL does and has. And I believe that that's why people love the NFL so much is because you know that on a day in and day out basis that the Kansas City Chiefs that they could get beat by the Denver Broncos, that the Kansas City Chiefs could get beat, back-to-back Super Bowl champions can get beat by the worst team in the league on a week in and week out basis. Now, college football fans are not used to that. But this is the new normal season as I've branded it. And we got to get used to it. And truly, it's actually better for college football that the SMUs of the world have the exact same shot to win as the Alabamas, even though Alabama, Georgia, USC, Michigan, that they have built-in advantages because they have history on their side. But when you are crowning a one true champion, logos can't matter. We can't just want to throw in the teams that are perceived to be historically strong. It's got to be what did you do on the field? And a lot of that is going to be fixed when I potentially am college football commissioner because scheduling uniformity must happen. That would be my first order of business on day one. And you guys make sure that you guys like, subscribe. I'm going to give you a second. Go hit the share button. Send this to a friend who loves college football like you love college football. So on day one, first thing that we are doing, scheduling uniformity because I am tired of these arguments. I am tired of people arguing and lobbying about their team and their conference and history and no. What we are going to do is we are going to take the arguments out because people are lobbyists for their own self-interest. They are lobbyists for their own teams, for their conference, everybody else, even the conference commissioners. But who is sitting there doing what's best for college football? And what's best for college football is better games, more parity. Who's doing what's best for it? Who will tell you that and who will tell you the truth? Because the answer to all of this, the strength of schedule and all of this stuff, because you have people within different conferences having different strengths of schedule. Look at Texas versus Georgia. Texas won the scheduling roulette, but who knew that Michigan was going to be so bad this year? Their strength of schedule will be way higher if Texas were better. Is strength of record, is that a better metric? Any of those things. So scheduling uniformity is day one thing that we're going to fix because more Power 4 non-conference games is the answer. We're going to go with a minimum of 10. Minimum of 10 out of your 12 games. We're going to drop all conferences down to 8 conference games. And then everybody has to at least play 2 non-conference games against the Power 4. So, and that is going to give us many more better crossover games. And we're not scheduling them 10 years out advance, 2 years max. That's it. So we can get better competition and better games. The networks are going to love it. The fans are going to love it. You're going to sell more merch. You're going to sell more tickets, and more people are going to watch because the games are going to be more competitive. But this weekend, though, in week 13, we had we had 6 ranked teams lose, and 3 of them lost to unranked teams. And now the question that we're left with is who is left standing for the college football top 12? Who wants to be there? Because we have seen so many teams that we all thought, and truthfully, this happens every single season, but it feels chaotic right now. Every single year, we have upsets and all of this stuff. But the difference is that when it was a 14 playoff, you in week 13 only had about 6 or 7 teams involved in potentially making the college football play that 14 playoff. And if the top 4 didn't lose, it wasn't happening. And now what we have is we still got 20 teams some kind of way involved in plus, really, because the Big 12 still has 8 or 9 teams that can make the conference championship. Plus that, plus the other conferences, we literally have 20 plus teams that are still in their fan bases, which are engaged. That means that more games matter. But now, what are we going to make out of the SEC and this mess that happened this weekend? Because you've had higher ranked teams losing to mid tier teams and lower tier teams in the conference. So here's what we have after this weekend. After we had Colorado get whooped up by Kansas, and we're going to go through these games in just a little bit. We had Ole Miss get beat up. We had and just some poor play at the end of the game, and Lane Kiffin went out sad. But the question is, were those coaches focused? We had Mike Elko. Same thing with Texas A&M. Were they focused? And we also had Alabama get absolutely drowned by Oklahoma. So here is my top 12 right now. Plus, then I'll give you the rankings. I'm going to give you the rankings first, and then I'm going to give you the seeding the way it would. So I have Oregon 1, Ohio State 2, Penn State 3. And you guys can leave in the chat whether you guys are feeling it, whether you agree with it, what. Penn State 3, Texas 4, Notre Dame 5, SMU 6, Miami 7, Indiana 8, Georgia 9, Tennessee 10, Boise State 11, and Clemson 12. But what that actually shakes out as when you bring in the bracket format, that puts Oregon at 1, Texas at 2 as the SEC champion, SMU as 3 as the ACC champion, Arizona State at number 4 as the Big 12 champion. Then we got Ohio State 5, Penn State 6, Notre Dame 7, and Miami 8. So they're going to all have home games. Then you're going to have Indiana, Georgia, Boise State, and Tennessee all going on the road, with Boise State being in the 11 seed. So remember where people were always putting that 12 seed as the group of 5 champion as Boise State, who is still up there right now. But no, that's not going to be the case, where Boise State might be in that 11 and then end up playing the 6 seed first, which then translates to the 2 seed. Now we got a whole different ball of worms and a whole different can of worms and everything else. So that's going to be interesting as well. Now, the SEC's best hope for 4 teams, I believe, at this point in time, is for Texas A&M to beat Texas. But then that could actually cause Texas to get left out, because Texas, for all you strength of schedule people, that ain't going to cut it if they lose to Texas A&M, because they're going to have no quality wins at that point in time. But we're going to start out, though, with the game of the week, the game of the weekend, the game everybody was talking about and excited about, which was Indiana versus Ohio State, a 38-15 game. And I remember when I was at Oregon, we had a special teams coordinator, and we used to break in the meetings. He used to say special teams, and we would respond, "Be special." That's it. Be special. You know what Indiana special teams were? Horrific. Punter dropped the snap right through his hands, let a punt return happen, and that was the ball game. Now, people pointed to this Ohio State team, and they were like, "Oh, man, this team absolutely just took Indiana behind the woodshed." Nah, that's not what I saw in the game. Ohio State's defense was absolutely dominant. They only allowed 68 yards passing, 8 for 18 by Curtis Rourke, and only allowed 85 yards rushing. So that's what, 153 yards total? That is absolute domination. But on the other hand, Indiana's defense only allowed 316 yards. 316 yards. And I believe, this is my own personal belief, when I watched this game, I was like, okay, can Indiana beat Ohio State? Yes. How many times would Indiana beat Ohio State out of 10? Probably 3 times. Probably 3 times. So does that mean they should be in the college football playoff? Yes. If they can beat a team, yes. They're going to need their A+ game. And Ohio State bringing their A-, B+ game, and you got a problem on your hands, because Ohio State's offense is very stoppable. We've seen them have trouble with Nebraska, and truthfully, their offense wasn't just running roughshod over this Indiana team until the game kind of got out of hand, when it was like 28-7. That's when things got out of hand. And then 31-7, that's when it got out of hand. And that's when, the Ohio State offense started to roll. But this was a 14-7 game at halftime that really should have been 7-7 if Indiana's special teams are better, because they stopped Ohio State on the goal line multiple times. But I noticed that Ryan Day did something at the end of this game. He channeled his inner Dan Lanning in this game, because he decided that extra touchdown at the end, he wanted to send a message. And at the end in the press conference, he was like, leave no doubt. But honestly, it felt flat to me. It did. I was like, come on, Ryan. This felt like, after we've seen the videos of Dan Lanning and the thumbs down and all the other things he's been using to motivate his team. And I'm not saying that Ryan Day, I'm not in that locker room, that he doesn't do that regularly, but this is the first time that he's come out and said a message like that. So it felt like a little bit of, trying to send a message and trying to, get in with the in crowd with what those guys are doing in terms of Oregon, Colorado, Indiana, that sort of bravado from your head coach. But I do want to give Kurt Singetti credit over there at Indiana, because people are trying to nitpick at them. And instead of, in the press conference, defending his team and being defensive, he was like, when they asked him, do they belong in the playoffs? He was like, man, get that stupid question out my face, basically. And I loved it. Nah, don't come around here playing around with me, because the minute that he gets to defending himself, defending his team and their record and everything else, it makes you look weak. But everybody knows that, especially after this weekend, ain't no leaving Indiana out of the playoff. Just say it, because they damn sure ain't losing to Purdue next week. Next game up, Alabama versus Oklahoma. This is another game that the college football community thought would not have mattered. I mean, they probably would have thought it would have mattered, because Oklahoma would have been better. But if you told them that Oklahoma was going to be 4-5, 4-6, 4-6 coming into this game, would you have believed them? Absolutely not. You would have never believed that Alabama was coming in with 2 losses and was going to be playing a Oklahoma team that was 4-6 and had buku injuries to their wide receivers. But this was a 24-3 absolute beatdown. And Brent Venables, he tied up Kalen DeBoer and Jalen Milroe in knots, dude. He tied them up, and it was like he had Connor Stallions working for him, looking at Alabama signs and hearing their helmet communication. That's how dialed in that this Oklahoma defense was on what Alabama was doing. They were absolutely dialed in every single aspect, and I loved it. Now, there's been a lot of people giving Alabama way too much credit this season for being just Alabama. They've been trying to prop them up, and I haven't seen them now. They're still trying to prop them up as a top 10, top 12 team. Listen, this is the team with 3 losses. They've lost to Vanderbilt, They have lost to Tennessee, which is a good football team, and they lost to Oklahoma. What are we talking about here? What are we talking about? If this was any other team besides Alabama who lost those football games, nobody would be making a case for them to possibly be included into the college football playoff under any scenario, if we are being honest. Now, Heather Dinich and everybody will tell you, oh, a 3-loss SEC team. Aside from the team losing the SEC championship, this should not even be a discussion. It would be different if Georgia, even if Georgia had those losses, you'd be like, okay, well, they can't beat the teams in the college football playoff. So why should they be there? We got to cover up the logos. Cover up the logos. And I know, listen, we're used to, as a man who has played at Oregon, of course you would rather beat Alabama in the championship, Georgia in the championship is going to give you more clout, right? Ohio State in the championship. But right is right and wrong is wrong. They didn't earn their way in. Oh, their strength of schedule. Nah, you can't talk about no damn strength of schedule when they played Mercer last week and they lost to bad football teams that other teams are housing. Nah, fam. Nah, fam. That just means that the SEC has some really good football teams, but no elite football teams right now. Now, Oklahoma held Alabama to the least amount of points that they've scored in 20 years, since 2004. And the Jalen Milroe show got canceled. And this is something that is going to be unpopular, but me and Ralph talked about it on the College Football Apostles a couple of weeks ago. In looking at the message boards and talking to Alabama fans, they are not in love with Jalen Milroe. Now, he's carried the team on his back at times, but if you think about this game, Alabama carried the game, and I want to point something out with this. Alabama carried the ball 30 times in the game. 15 were by running backs, and 15 were in Jam Miller and 3 for Justice Haynes, and then you have 15 for Jalen Milroe. So he is the one who is largely carrying the load of this team. And then think about what happened in their win against LSU, 48 rushes. That one got way out of hand, and those were late. But Jalen Milroe, second most touches in the rushing department. He had more rushing yards than all the running backs combined. That is an inherent problem with the way you run your offense and the way that you run your team. So either Kalen DeBoer, because we saw him do something completely different with Michael Penix. So either he does not believe in Jalen Milroe, the passer, or Jalen Milroe can't do the things that he's asking him to do, and now he's adjusting the offense to call plays that try to win football games. So Alabama has an identity problem right now, and I do believe that there is a chance that we do see Jalen Milroe in the portal this year. I do. Because if you are Kalen DeBoer, he's done some masterful things. I'm not saying that this is no disparagement upon him. But if you are Kalen DeBoer and you're at Alabama and you're looking toward next year, are you trying to bring in a transfer? Like, how good do you really feel about your quarterback position, if we're being honest? You like it, but you don't love it. You loved Michael Penix and what he could do. So you may see somebody come in, at least some sort of quarterback competition. And if you tell Jalen Milroe that it's going to be a quarterback competition, he might say deuces. Just saying. But I do want to give Brent Venables, Oklahoma's head coach, some credit, though, because he salvaged this season. This season. But if I had told you, think about this. It was 24-3. If I told you that Jackson Arnold, their quarterback, would only throw for 68 yards, would you have believed that they would have won this football game? Absolutely not. But the kid ran for He ran 25 times for 131, which is the exact same thing we said at Alabama, but sometimes it can get you wins. But their backs ran for another 130 yards too. Hmm. Just saying, this was an excellent defensive performance and a running the ball performance and Oklahoma's going to be in the need of a quarterback after this year too. Just saying. All right, next game up. Colorado versus Kansas. Something, you know how and if you go back to my preview show, you know how something feels wrong about a game? Have you ever, when we're previewing all these games, sometimes I get a little funny feeling in my stomach and I'm like, something ain't right. Like when Oregon was getting ready to play Wisconsin a couple weeks ago, everything said that Oregon should have blown Wisconsin out. But adding in the 8 games, adding in their 8 straight conference games, 3 games across 2 time zones, no bye week, players tired, some injured players, all of that. I was like, this sets up, even though they just got beat up by Iowa 2 weeks prior. Oh, and Wisconsin was coming off a bye week. I was like, this sets up for a much closer game. And this is the same way it was with Kansas and Colorado, because Colorado, yes, they've been under the media scrutiny and microscope for a year and a half now. But the difference is this: when the pressure to win gets up on you and you know that you're actually playing for something. Because I've been there. I've been there when I was at Oregon, and then we lost to Stanford and then ended up missing out getting to go to the college football playoff, to go to the national championship. Yes, the BCS computer screwed us and everything else, but still, you can feel the pressure of the season weighing on you as it gets longer and longer, because you know every game matters so much and it makes you a little bit tense and tight. And that's what happened to Colorado. However, though, Colorado would have loved to have played Weber State or Mercer or Citadel or Portland State this week, like some SEC teams did who only play 8 conference games. That would have helped them out to be guaranteed 9-2 heading into the Oklahoma State game next week. Oh, that would have made them feel a lot better, right? Exactly. It is that if you're going to play them teams, it needs to be in the beginning of the season. But anyways, this is the first time all year that Colorado even allowed 200 yards rushing. The first time the entire season, and it was Kansas's David Neal, 37 carries, 203 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So not only did the team rush for 200 yards, because the team finished with 333 and 3 touchdowns, David Neal himself rushed for 200 yards, which Colorado had not allowed all year. And Deion Sanders said it best: you control your own destiny, and they blew it. Because it's that pressure, it mounts. And these are young kids who've never been in that situation. This is why the Georgias, the Alabamas, the Clemsons, the teams that consistently have played in big games year after year and have played in the college football playoff, and all of these teams, they are better prepared to handle big time games when the pressure starts to mount, because they have been around it since they were freshmen, when they weren't playing or barely playing, then sophomores. By the time they hit juniors and seniors, they've been a part of so many of these high energy games. It feels a lot more comfortable, and these situations toward the end of the season. And that's the difference. That's why you see these teams lose. It's not because they can't win. It's because that pressure got to them and it mounts. You got to watch Arizona State playing Arizona next week. They're playing for everything, unbelievably. Watch how close that game might be. Just saying. But the biggest question coming out of this game, though, was surrounding Travis Hunter, who showed out in this game. He had 8 for 125 and 2 touchdowns receiving. So did he do enough to get himself the Heisman Trophy if Colorado finishes 9-3 in the regular season and doesn't get into the college football playoff? Because it's really going to be him or Aston Jeanty at this point. Unless we have, a Dylan Gabriel or, Cam Ward or somebody show up. But the person who should be on this list too is Cam Scatterboo from Arizona State. But we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Next game up, though, we got Ole Miss versus Florida. Ole Miss 24, Florida 24, Ole Miss 17. Ole Miss wasted a lot of money. They did on this roster. And after Lincoln Riley said last week, hey, listen, I've talked to a bunch of coaches. They don't want to. They don't even really want to play in the conference championship because that might get you out of the college football playoff. Well, hey, guess what? You ain't got to worry about that no more. So the question is, was Lane Kiffin worrying about the college football playoff being distracted about whether we're going to play in the conference championship game or not? Will we get in? Will we not? Bro, just win your damn games and you'll get in. Because Ole Miss has 3 losses to unranked teams, LSU, Kentucky, and Florida. Completely unacceptable with the number 1 transfer class. You had a good base coming back. You got a quarterback in Jackson Dart. These losses are 100% unacceptable. And don't talk to me about the SEC is so tough. Don't give me that. Because great teams, elite teams, beat teams that are at the bottom of the conference like Kentucky. And yes, is Florida playing better? 100%. There is no doubt about it that this 5-6 team, that this team is or 6, well, they're 6-5 now, I believe, but that this team is a really good football team. And yes, they're 6-5. We're talking about a team that just 3 games ago, so they beat Ole Miss, they beat LSU. Texas lit them up 49-17. Come on, man. Georgia beat them 34-20, even though that game was much closer than it actually looked. So, yes, Florida is a much improved team. But let's not sit here and act like it's not the exact same team, too, that is inconsistent, who got beat up by Miami, got beat up by Texas A&M, lost to Tennessee, and then have that Georgia and Texas loss. Come on, man. Yes, their schedule was insanely tough, but good teams win those games. And there's a reason why they weren't winning those games. Are they playing better? Yes. Are they tougher? Yes. But Ole Miss is supposed to win this game. They have a veteran quarterback compared to a true freshman. Running back, veterans versus a true freshman. Florida is injured as well. Come on, man. Ole Miss just had their biggest win in like 50 years against Georgia. And then show up this and wet the bed? Nah, Lane Kiffin is going to have some very tough questions that the boosters are going to be asking him. Because it's like, hold up, we literally gave you everything that you needed. We gave you $20 million to build a roster. You got the best defensive line in college football, probably. And this is what we doing? Every single time that Ole Miss has faced anybody with a pulse, what's happened to their offense? I don't know what happened in that 20-17 Kentucky loss, but they got shut down on offense. Oklahoma shut them down to 26 points. And then Georgia held them to they beat Georgia 28-10. So it's like their offense is hit or miss depending on who they're playing week to week. And so that either leads me to believe, is this a quarterback issue? Or is this a Lane Kiffin issue? Because he clearly can win the big game. They just beat Georgia. But the reason why head coaches make the big bucks is that they're able to keep their teams focused throughout an entire season. Because the season is long, kids are in school, you got girlfriend problems, mom problems, injuries, stress. I'm not playing, NIL money, all sorts of pressures out in the world, social media, distractions. And the coach's job is to keep everybody focused, and that's why you get paid millions and millions of dollars. And Lane Kiffin is struggling with that at this point in time. Next up, we got Texas A&M versus Auburn. Oh, an overtime thriller. Not one. Not two, not three, but four overtimes. 41-43, Auburn. Mike Elko, just like Lane Kiffin, jinxed this game at the press conference last week. Lane Kiffin talking about the teams not wanting to go to the SEC championship. Now he ain't got to worry about that. Mike Elko was asked if his team was looking ahead to the Texas game instead of the Auburn game, and he slipped up and said, "Man, listen, all our energy is on the Auburn game." Now it was a slip, but a lot of people are looking to that Texas game. And luckily for Texas A&M, all the right dominoes fell that next week that Texas game is going to determine who plays Georgia in the SEC championship. Ooh, buddy. Um, Now this game though was three separate games. You had Auburn up 21-0. Yes, Auburn was up 21-0 in this game. And then Texas A&M ended up taking the lead with around 2 minutes and some odd change to go, 31-28. And then that was two separate games because Texas A&M came storming all the way back, went on a 31-7 run. And then in overtime, Texas A&M gave this away. I actually was mad at Auburn at the end of the second overtime when they scored a touchdown. I was like, go for two, Hugh Freeze. Go for two. Don't keep playing this game. But he did. They ended up in the 2-point conversion battle. Auburn got the first one, and then Texas A&M had a perfect play call. Hit the running back right in the mittens, and he just dropped it. Now I feel bad for that young man. Quick story. When I was in high school, we played a game. There was a guy on our team, phenomenal high school basketball player. Was going to go to college to go play. We were playing against Crenshaw in the city semifinals. We're up. I hit a 3-pointer toward the end of the game. They go down, make a couple free throws, and then we're down one, I believe. And we're getting the ball up court. He's dribbling down the court. I'm close by the basket, like, pass me the ball. And he decided not to pass it, but that was fine. He had a clear path to the for the lay-in, except for he was 6'6". He jumped, took off like he was gonna dunk it, changed his mind, decided to finger roll off the back rim. We lose the game. And what ended up happening is I'm sad about it. I'm upset, hurt, everything like everybody else. I go to college, go to the NFL. My life's fine. I still think about the game in disappointment, but I didn't even find out until I was in the NFL that my teammate was having such a hard time with losing that game. He didn't even go to college to go play. He ended up in therapy, ended up all kinds of things. So I know fans are disappointed in when teams lose and plays like that happen, but please show some heart and humanity to this kid because that sucks. That sucks, and I've seen it with my own two eyes, and coming to find that out after, that was horrible, and I felt bad the fact that I didn't even know. So so give Amari Daniels some love because that's a tough scenario though. But this win will get people off of Hugh Freeze's back a little bit, and we'll go over the coaches and all of that stuff in a little bit. But Texas A&M though, they got a miracle. They got a Christmas miracle in that they are still alive in the college football playoff. Inexplicably, they are still alive. And in terms of, because if they beat Texas, they will go to the SEC championship. But the problem though is I believe the issue that you're going to run into with Texas A&M, and remember the committee chair was asked about if a 3-loss SEC team could get in, or who, if you were playing in the conference championship games, and he said we're going to give credit to people who play in the conference championship games. But if Texas A&M beats Texas, and then Texas A&M gets beat up by Georgia in the SEC championship, then what do? You're going to have an 8-4 Texas A&M team that played in the SEC championship with losses to Notre Dame, who's going to be in the college football playoff, South Carolina, who's not going to be in the college football playoff, Auburn, and then Georgia. But then they're going to have a win over Texas. Like that's going to be their feather in their cap is that win over Texas. So are they then going to get in the college football playoff as an 8-4 team? That's where I think that you're going to have that scenario put to the test if Texas A&M does win. But now let's get to those championship scenarios though. For the SEC championship, this one is pretty straightforward and simple. Georgia already clinched. They clinched in that riveting battle versus UMass this last weekend, while Texas and Texas A&M were absolutely playing in dogfights. But Georgia's going to play the winner of the Texas and Texas A&M game. Clean cut, end of story, nothing to talk about. All that SEC chaos. All these teams are going to end up 6-2, 10-2. Nope. Nope, that's not happening. The ACC championship scenarios. SMU, just like Georgia, is in. Then you got Miami, who plays Syracuse this weekend. And if they beat Syracuse, they're in the college football, they're in the ACC championship against SMU. If Miami loses, Clemson is in. So it'll either be SMU versus Miami or SMU versus Clemson. And Clemson plays South Carolina this weekend in a game, honestly, that doesn't matter at all. Except for, well, I would say it matters to South Carolina and to Clemson in that people are talking about South Carolina getting into the college football playoff. So that's going to be an interesting thing. And then the Clemson scenario is because South Carolina is 8-3 right now. Clemson is 9-2. So if Clemson beats South Carolina, then they would have a chance and a case to where win or lose the ACC championship. Now you may be able to get in over a 4-loss Texas A&M. And then you have the Big Ten championship scenarios, which are Oregon is in. At least we have some clarity in the SEC, ACC, and Big Ten. You have Oregon is in, and then right now they would be playing Ohio State unless Ohio State loses to Michigan. And if they lose to Michigan, then there are some scenarios that happen with Penn State and Indiana, which depends on what happens in their games this weekend. So that's the Big Ten. And then the last one that we got is the Big 12, because the Big 12 championship scenarios, we can't even get into it. There are literally still 8 teams involved that could make the Big 12 championship. But Arizona State and Iowa State have the best shots. They have the best mathematic possibilities. And ASU wins and they're in. Like that's about as clear as it gets. But Iowa State, there's some other stuff that can happen as well. All right, now we got to move on to another game. And that was a game that damn near ended up in an upset and blew up my whole top of the Big Ten, don't lose to the middle of the Big Ten scenarios. And that was Penn State versus Minnesota, 26-25. Because you had Kentucky. Well, first, before we get into the Kentucky-Tennessee game, that Penn State-Minnesota game, that game got extremely close. But it also gave credence to what I've been saying about this Penn State team all year and how I knew that this game was going to be close. Penn State's offense is not good enough to win a national championship. It's not. It's not good enough to beat the best teams in college football. It's not. It's not good enough to beat Ohio State. It's not good enough to beat Oregon. Probably not good enough to beat Georgia. Same thing with, I don't even think they're good enough to beat Indiana if we've really been honest. Don't. And Drew Aller in this game, 21 for 28, 244 and a touchdown. And their tight end, Tyler Warren, 8 for 102. And I'm going to tell you this. over the course of the season, when you look at Penn State, and mind you, I am a former tight end. So I love tight ends. I believe that they are completely undervalued and underused. But the issue is this: Penn State has completed 213 passes on the season. 213 passes on the season. 75 of them have gone to Tyler Warren. The next highest is Harrison Wallace, who's a wide receiver with 35 catches. Then you got a running back with 30. So the most wide receiver catches that you have are 35 and then 16. Tyler Warren has 910 yards. Next closest is Harrison Wallace with 579 yards. You cannot win a national championship when your best receiving threat is your tight end. In terms of, he's the leading receiver, damn near double the yards as well, damn near double the catches, actually more than double the catches. That's not going to work. It's not going to work at all. Same thing that Michigan's in the same situation with Loveland. This is why your offenses are struggling. You have to be able to get something on the outside with your wideouts. People will say it's talent. They don't have it. I don't believe it. Because Penn State is recruited well. And maybe they don't have NFL talent on the outside at wideout, but scheme, you can get your guys open. You can get your guys open versus Minnesota. You can get your guys open versus Rutgers. You can get your guys open versus USC, other people. Yes. Come on, man. We just call a spade out here on the Unafraid Show. You guys make sure that you guys like, subscribe, get notifications. Let me hop in the chat, see what you guys left in there, because we will always get to your comments. And you guys can leave your comments on @Unafraid Show, @George Wrighster, and we'll get them in the mailbag and everything else. All right, so we have also been looking at what's going on in that Kentucky Texas game. 31-14. And the biggest question coming out of this game is the health of Quinn Ewers. Is Quinn Ewers going to be healthy? He's went for an MRI today. And I know that Texas fans love Arch Manning. But throwing him into the fire when everything is on the line, how do we think that that's going to work out? He's played some this season, hadn't played in weeks until this last week. But how are we supposed to believe that everything is going to be okay? And last year, and if everything's not okay with Quinn Ewers, how are we supposed to believe, right? How are we supposed to believe and not try to apply the same logic last year with Jordan Travis in Florida State, who still finished undefeated and won with a backup quarterback, but we won't apply that to Texas. Now, is Texas's backup quarterback in Arch Manning better? Yes. But the last time we saw him in a meaningful game, really, was that Georgia game. And Georgia was overwhelming Texas in every single aspect. So that's the question that we got to answer. Are we going to be consistent, or are we going to be hypocrites when it comes to Texas and their quarterback situation? But this game, though, where they were playing against Kentucky, they were up 24-7 at half. And this game wasn't particularly close. However, though, even though it wasn't particularly close, Kentucky tried to rally. But this Texas team, I believe that we are watching a really good football team. But when we look at their schedule, and they are 10-1, there is no difference between what they have done and what Indiana has done. Indiana, when they played against the first really tough team that they played against, which was Ohio State, they got beat up. Texas played against one really tough team. What did they do? Got beat up by Georgia. Texas has 0 wins on their schedule against currently ranked teams. None. Colorado State, Michigan, UTSA, ULM, Mississippi State, Oklahoma, Georgia, which they lost, Vanderbilt, Florida, Arkansas, and Kentucky. A lot of middle tier teams on there. And do you still have to show up and win? Yes. Good teams beat the middle teams. This is why I'm good with Texas being in the playoff. The same reason why I'm good with Indiana being in the playoff is because good teams beat mid. Next game up. Nobody in their right mind would have told you that BYU versus Arizona State would be a meaningful football game in November. If anybody told you that, they are a liar or they got Biff's almanac from Back to the Future. Either one of the two. And this was a 28-23 game that got to chaos at the end. If you did not see it, I suggest you go back and look at some highlights because this one took crazy pills at the end. Arizona State tried to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. BYU caught a Hail Mary at the very end. It was just 2 yards too short. There was a field storming in between the time that Arizona State thought they won and in between the Hail Mary, like a 20-minute delay between one play. But Arizona State, though, is the best story in college football. They were literally picked last in the Big 12. 16 out of 16. And this team is doing something that is tough. And this is the reason why the game almost got away from them. Because learning to win is hard. Learning to win in November is damn near impossible. And they got a 34-year-old head coach in Kenny Dillingham. And he coached that game like he was trying to close out a game of Madden against his little brother. Stop trolling the opponent with gimmicks and take one good advice from Herm Edwards. You play to win the game. But the man who helped them win that game is a man I will stand up and cape for. He should be on that Heisman stage, is Cam Scatterbo. 28 for 147 and 3 touchdowns for Arizona State. Their running back, I have said it, he's a white running back, so he's not going to get the same credit. It's like being in a gang. And I heard a comedian say this once. He was like, yo, you have to be most terrified and most scared of the white guy that's hanging out with the gang. With the gang of Mexicans or black guys, you got to be most scared of the white guy. Because what the hell did he have to do to get their respect? And that's the way it is with Cam Scatterbo. Listen, he got everybody respect that they play against because he's an absolute dog. A dog. I know we get to talking about Ashton Jeanty and he's over 2,000 yards and all of that stuff, but this dude is carrying Arizona State on his back, doing everything. He's thrown passes. Going back to last year, it is just unbelievable. And I know that most people have not seen him play. There are going to be comparisons. They're like, oh, he must be like Toby Gerhart at Stanford. No. Oh, he must be like Christian McCaffrey. No, he's like Christian McCaffrey and Toby Gerhart had a baby, and it was Cam Scatterbo. Because he's fast enough. He's not big and Mike Allstott-ish like the other guy from Stanford. Nah, this dude's a good quality running back. And anybody that thought that this game was not going to matter, boy, were you wrong. And now Arizona State has the inside track to go to the Big 12 championship. But imagine BYU, who just lost last week, if they had the luxury of playing Wofford this week, if they could have played Portland State, if they could have played Weber State at this point in time in the season, like some of the SEC teams did, or Mercer like Alabama did last week. Imagine having that advantage. Yeah, buddy. It'd be way different. So we got to pay attention to why those things happen. But before we get completely out of here, I want to make sure that we talk about that there were a bunch of games this weekend that mattered. But there were also games that mattered that y'all didn't watch. And that's why you got me here. And I got one big question for all the big game, all the teams that played games that mattered this weekend that you didn't watch. So here are my questions. UMass versus Georgia, 59-21. Question, should we be worried about Georgia? This game was 31-21 with 9 minutes to go in the third quarter. UMass is literally one of the 5 worst teams in college football. How did you, Georgia, allow them to score 21 points through 9 minutes in the third quarter? Only up 10 points. How? Next game that you guys didn't watch, even though that this game was in prime time, you had Army versus Notre Dame, 49-14. Army, listen. You can't be doing this to America. You need to beat up the Navy. Now you need to beat up the Army. Come on, Notre Dame. No, but the question, though, for real, though, is how did Notre Dame lose to Northern Illinois? How? They have been absolutely dominant since that point in every single facet. They would be sharing AP #1 votes with Oregon if they didn't lose that Northern Illinois game. You'd have like 31 votes, 31 votes probably. Maybe a few for Oregon just because they beat Ohio State. Come on, man. What? How? All right, the next game that you guys did not watch, but of course we got to talk about UTEP versus Tennessee. 56-0. And my only question is, this is November. How did Tennessee survive this gauntlet of a game? This late in the season, 56-0. Then they're going to scrape back into the college football playoff simply by playing UTEP. Oh, man, how did you do it, Tennessee? Get out of here. Next game up, Wake Forest versus Miami, 42-14. The one big question, how is Miami supposed to win with this problematic defense? You might be like, George, they only scored 14 points. If you watch the game, Wake Forest probably should have scored like 28 points. Miami's defense is they are problematic. And they still have not. Louisville is what, the best team that they've played all year? When they run into SMU, if they are able to beat Syracuse up in the Carrier Dome this weekend, I have no idea how they're going to contain SMU. And SMU is a good team. They're not even an elite team. This is why Miami cannot win the championship. But if they miss the college football playoff, Lord have mercy. If they lose at Syracuse, Mario Cristobal and them people are going to be, they're going to be mad at him. SMU versus Virginia, 33-7. One big question, why is nobody talking about SMU? They have been consistently left on the outside of the college football playoff rankings, and all they do is just keep winning and winning and winning. They literally bet on themselves going to the ACC, taking no money. And why is nobody talking about what this team is doing? You're going to learn in a couple weeks. Last game up that we got to talk about that nobody else watched, really, but me. Boise State versus Wyoming, 17-13. And Ashton Jeanty had another 19 carries, 109, and a touchdown. And Laramie is a tough place to win, but Boise State has been playing with fire. And we know the rules. If you play with fire, you will get burned. If you play with fire, my friends, you will get burned. And the last thing I want to bring up is this Iowa State-Utah game. Now, remember a couple weeks ago, Utah's athletic director went up there and got himself fined tens of thousands of dollars because he was complaining about the Big 12 refs. Well, Utah had an opportunity to win this football game, and there was a call that has not been made for 42 years that got a defensive holding on a field goal block that had not been called in 42 years. And it was called against Utah. Now, the conspiracy, and this was against Iowa State in their 31-28 loss. What did you guys think about that? You guys can leave it on the chat, leave it in the comments, because this was or leave it on Twitter, wherever you're watching. This was something that was troubling, because if there is some sort of retribution happening against Utah by the officials, this is a problem. And there needs to be my second act as college football commissioner after fixing the schedules. It would be making sure officials are full-time employees and you don't have conference officials. We are going to have college football officials. We are going to be spreading them out all over the place. We are not going to have Big Ten officials, AC. Nope. We're going to have officials, because now we're going to get a more consistent product. The emphasis is going to be, and the mandates are going to be from the top, as opposed to each individual conference where somebody's emphasizing holding, somebody's emphasizing PI. No, we are going to be having the same emphasis. So when we get into meaningful games or non-conference games or the college football playoff, there is consistency in officiating. That's my second act of business. And y'all, thanks for coming to my TED Talk. We will have more content on Unafraid Show on YouTube every day this week. Make sure that you come back, mailbag, college football apostle, shorts, everything in between. Leave your comments, leave your likes. Go on YouTube. If you have not subscribed yet, go subscribe, people. We're almost at 20,000 subscribers, and we got big giveaways coming at 20,000. Peace out. Catch you guys later.